Sunday mornings in Harpersville always began with the ringing of the bells of the Baptist Church on Main Street. On this morning, September 15th, 2024, the bells rang out over the quiet streets covered with the first autumn leaves, calling residents to their weekly worship service. For most of the 23,000 residents of this Texas town, the church was not just a place of worship, but the center of social life, where the reputation and status of each family was determined. Rosalie Collins stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, adjusting the collar of her dark blue dress. At 38, she retained the attractiveness that had once made her prom queen at the local high school. Her blonde hair was neatly styled, her makeup flawless but barely noticeable, just as expected in their circle. She had been working as an insurance agent at the local State Farm office for 11 years, and her clients valued her for her reliability and attention to detail. "Shane, we're going to be late," she called to her husband, who was still fussing in the bathroom. A few minutes later, he came out, buttoning the cuffs of his white shirt. At 42, Shane Collins looked like the embodiment of the American dream of an honest, hard worker. He had the strong hands of a carpenter, a tanned face and gray hair at the temples, which only added to his respectability. His workshop, Collins Woodworks, was located in the industrial part of town and had a reputation as the best in the area. Orders for furniture, antique restoration, and finishing work came not only from local residents, but also from neighboring towns. "Is Wayne here yet?" Shane asked, adjusting his tie. "His car is in the driveway," Rosalie replied, looking out the window at the red Ford pickup truck parked next to their silver Honda sedan. Wayne Harrison, Rosalie's younger brother, never missed Sunday services with his sister and brother-in-law. At 35, he remained a bachelor, which was considered somewhat unusual in Harpersville, but it was explained by his busy schedule as a physical education teacher at the local high school and coach of the school basketball team. Wayne sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, browsing the sports news on his phone. Tall and athletic, he had maintained the physique that had once made him a star on the school basketball team. After serving in the Army, he returned to his hometown and found his calling in working with children. His students adored him, parents trusted him, and the school administration considered him one of their best teachers. "Good morning, Wayne." Shane put his hand on his brother-in-law's shoulder, and he looked up with a smile. "Ready for Pastor Johnson's sermon on the sins of the modern world?" Wayne grinned. There was a light, friendly atmosphere between them that had developed over 12 years of Rosalie and Shane's marriage. Wayne was often at their house, helping with repairs, spending weekends watching football and drinking beer. The neighbors were used to seeing his red pickup truck in their driveway in the evenings and on weekends. The Collins family took their usual seats in the fourth row of the First Assembly Baptist Church. Rosalie sat between her husband and brother, as usual. Surrounding them were other respected families of Harpersville: the Johnsons, who owned the local bank, the Parkers, who owned the car dealership, and the Wilsons, who owned 3 fast food restaurants. They were the elite of a small town, people whose names meant something in the local community. Pastor Johnson, a man in his 60s with graying hair and a stern gaze, rose to the pulpit. His sermon was about the importance of family values and moral fortitude in an era of increasing moral decline. He talked about how external forces were trying to destroy the traditional family, how important it was to stick together and support each other in the face of the temptations of the modern world. Rosalie listened attentively, nodding in agreement from time to time. Shane and Wayne sat quietly, occasionally exchanging glances when the pastor spoke particularly emotionally about the need to resist unnatural influences in society. After the service, the congregation lingered in the churchyard as usual, discussing local news and plans for the week. "Rosalie, dear, how are things at the office?" Margaret Wilson, the wife of the restaurant owner, an elegant woman in an expensive suit, approached her. "Everything's great. Thanks for asking. I closed 3 new life insurance policies this week," Rosalie replied with a professional smile. "And Shane, how's business?" I heard you got an order to make furniture for the new city hall. Shane nodded. Yes, it's a big order. Wayne helps me with some of the details in the evenings. He has golden hands. As it turns out, Wayne smiled. Shane is exaggerating. I'm just learning from the master. Margaret Wilson nodded approvingly. It's wonderful when families support each other. Wayne, when are you finally going to find yourself a nice girl? Such a handsome bachelor in our town is almost a crime. Wayne blushed. I'm focused on my career, Mrs. Wilson. Maybe someday. After church, the family went to their home for lunch. The Collins house was located in the prestigious Oak Hill neighborhood, a 2-story brick mansion with a well-kept lawn and rose bushes that were Rosalie's pride and joy. Inside, the house was furnished with Shane's handmade furniture, dark oak tables, cabinets, and shelves that showcased his craftsmanship. Rosalie prepared Sunday dinner, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and her famous apple pie. Shane and Wayne settled into the living room, watching the pre-game analysis of the Dallas Cowboys match. Their voices mingled with the sounds of the television, creating a cozy home atmosphere. Tony Romo has always been underrated as a quarterback, Wayne said, leaning back in his leather chair. I agree. But Dak Prescott is doing well this season, Shane replied, sitting on the sofa next to Wayne's chair. Between them on the coffee table were 2 cans of Budweiser beer. Rosalie watched them from the kitchen, stirring the gravy. She always enjoyed seeing her husband and brother get along so well. When they were kids, Wayne was her protector, the older brother who stood up for her at school. When she met Shane at the local fair in 2012, Wayne immediately approved of her choice. He's a good guy, he said at the time, reliable. Over the 12 years of their marriage, Wayne had become more than just a brother-in-law to Shane. He was a true friend. They went fishing together, watched games, and repaired the house. Wayne helped Shane expand his workshop 3 years ago, working evenings and weekends without pay. Family should support family, he said. Lunch was spent in the usual friendly atmosphere. They discussed plans for the week, local news, and the successes of Wayne's school basketball team. Rosalie talked about her clients, and Shane talked about new orders at the workshop. After the meal, the men returned to the TV and Rosalie cleared the table. Let me help you, Wayne said, getting up and starting to collect the plates. Thanks, but I can handle it, Rosalie replied. You watch the game. Shane, go watch. I'll help my sister, Wayne insisted. They worked silently in the kitchen, Wayne rinsing the plates and Rosalie loading the dishwasher. This scene had been repeated every Sunday for many years, a family ritual that emphasized their closeness as a family. Wayne, Mrs. Wilson is right, you know, Rosalie finally said. You really should start thinking about your personal life. You're a wonderful man. Any woman would be happy with you. Wayne froze for a moment, holding a plate in his hands. I just haven't met the right one yet. Maybe you should try those dating sites. Or I can introduce you to some of my colleagues. No, Rosie. When the time is right, it will happen naturally. She noticed something strange in his voice, but didn't press the issue. Wayne had always been reserved when it came to his personal life. In the evening, after Wayne had gone home, Rosalie and Shane sat on the porch, enjoying the cool air. Neighbors were watering their lawns, children were riding their bikes. It was an idyllic picture of American provincial life. Shane, don't you think Wayne has been a little pensive lately? Rosalie asked. Shane shrugged. Maybe he's tired from work. The new school year is always difficult. Or maybe he's feeling lonely. He's not a young guy anymore. Wayne will find his soulmate when he's ready. Shane took her hand in his. Not everyone is in a hurry to start a family. Rosalie nodded, but something was bothering her. Over the past few months, she had noticed changes in her brother's behavior. He had started staying over more often in the evenings, especially when Shane was working on difficult projects in his workshop. Sometimes she would catch them talking quietly, which would stop when she entered the room. But these were just little things, nothing serious. Wayne helped Shane with his work, which was natural. They had become close friends over the years. That's good, she decided. Families should be close. When they went up to the bedroom, Shane stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the dark street. Rosalie was already in bed, reading a book. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Nothing in particular," he replied, but there was a tension in his voice. That night, Rosalie woke up and found Shane awake. He was lying on his back, staring at the ceiling. When she asked if everything was okay, he said he just couldn't sleep, thinking about work. In the morning, Shane left for the workshop earlier than usual. Rosalie stopped by the office, where she spent the day sorting through insurance claims and meeting with clients. Working in a small town meant that she knew almost all of her clients personally, from young families buying their first car insurance policies to elderly people planning their estates. In the evening, Wayne stopped by to help Shane with an order for City Hall. Rosalie saw the light in the workshop until late at night and heard the sounds of tools working. When Shane finally came home around 11, he said that Wayne had already left. This scene repeated itself several times a week. Wayne would come by after work, and he and Shane would spend hours in the workshop working on various projects. Rosalie was grateful to her brother for helping her husband, but sometimes she wanted to spend more time alone with Shane. One Wednesday evening, she decided to bring them coffee and sandwiches to the workshop. As she approached the door, she heard their voices inside. They were talking quietly, almost whispering, and she couldn't make out the words. When she knocked and entered, the two men quickly moved away from each other. Shane stood at the workbench, Wayne at the window on the opposite side of the workshop. "I brought you a snack," she said, placing the tray on the table. "Thanks, honey," Shane replied, but avoided looking her in the eye. "Great, I'm hungry," Wayne added, with a somewhat forced smile. The atmosphere in the workshop seemed tense, but Rosalie couldn't figure out why. Maybe they had disagreements about the project. October brought the first truly cool days to Harpersville. Rosalie had always loved this time of year, when the leaves on the oak trees along Main Street turned golden, and you could sit on the porch in the evenings wrapped in a blanket. But this year, autumn brought something else with it, a growing sense of unease that she couldn't explain. It all started with phone calls. Shane had always been a sociable person. Clients would call him at home to discuss projects and finalize order details. But in recent weeks, the nature of those calls had changed. When the phone rang in the evening, Shane would quickly get up and go to another room, speaking quietly, almost in a whisper. When Rosalie entered the room, he would hurriedly end the conversation. "Who was that?" she would ask. "A client about an order," Shane would reply, but he avoided looking her in the eye. One evening, while Shane was taking a shower, his phone vibrated on the bedside table. Rosalie glanced at the screen and saw Wayne's name. At 9:30 in the evening? It seemed strange to her. Wayne usually called during the day or early evening if he needed to discuss something. When Shane came out of the bathroom, she said, "Wayne called." Shane grabbed the phone too quickly. "Probably something about work. I'll call him back tomorrow." But the next day, Rosalie noticed that Shane left the workshop several times to talk on the phone. She saw him through the office window. He was standing on the street, turned away from the workshop, gesturing animatedly during the conversation. Work meetings also became more frequent and longer. Shane began staying late in the workshop almost every day. When Rosalie asked about orders, he said that he had a lot of work, deadlines were looming, and he needed to finish a project for the city hall. But when she offered to bring him dinner, he refused, saying that he was too focused on work and didn't want to be distracted. Wayne began to visit their house even more often. He used to come mainly on weekends, but now his red pickup truck was parked in their driveway 3 or 4 evenings a week. Officially, he was helping Shane with large orders, but Rosalie noticed that they often just sat in the living room, talking quietly or watching TV. "Wayne, you practically live here," she joked once. "Maybe it's time to find a girlfriend so you have somewhere else to spend your time." Wayne blushed. "I'm just helping Shane. It's a big order, and we need the extra hands." "I understand," but you're spending all your free time with us. That can't be good for your personal life." Shane quickly interjected, "Wayne is a big help, Rosie." I couldn't handle the workload without him, but Rosalie could see that the explanation sounded strained. When she peeked into the workshop, it sometimes seemed like they were talking more than they were working. And sometimes, when she approached the house, their voices would quiet, as if they stopped talking when she came near. The atmosphere in Harpersville always became particularly conservative in the fall. City council elections were approaching, and traditional family values were once again the main topic of public discussion. Pastor Johnson delivered particularly fiery sermons about the moral decay in big cities and the need to defend Christian principles. On Wednesday evening, Rosalie attended a meeting of the Church Women's Committee at Margaret Wilson's house. The ladies discussed organizing the fall festival and raising funds for missionary work. The conversation drifted imperceptibly to local news. "Have you heard about that teacher from Austin?" said Betty Parker, the car dealer's wife. "He was fired for promoting non-traditional relationships among children." "How awful," Margaret Wilson shook her head. "How do people like that even get into schools?" "Parents trust them with their children." "That couldn't happen here in Harpersville," said Susan Taylor, the school principal's secretary, confidently. "We screen all candidates thoroughly. Morality is the first thing we look for." Rosalie listened, thinking of Wayne. He had been working at the local school for 10 years and was loved by children and parents alike. But these conversations reminded her how intolerant the local community was of any deviation from the accepted norms. "You know what worries me?" Betty Parker continued. "These people know how to hide. Outwardly, they may look completely normal, but inside," she grimaced, "it's like a disease that eats away at normal society from within." "That's why it's so important to be vigilant," Margaret agreed. "Watch for signs, notice strange behavior. Family and church should be our protective walls." On her way home, Rosalie thought about this conversation. She had never given much thought to such matters, simply accepting the views of those around her as a given. But something in the lady's fierce condemnation made her feel uncomfortable. At home, she found Shane and Wayne in the living room. They were sitting on the couch watching some sports program, but the TV was on low. When she entered, both men turned sharply toward her, as if caught off guard. "How was the meeting?" Shane asked. "Same as usual. We're planning the festival," Rosalie replied, studying their faces. Something was wrong. Shane looked tense, and Wayne was avoiding looking at her. "Wayne, didn't you have dinner?" "No, but I'm not hungry." "Thanks." "I don't really feel like eating either," Shane added. "We had a snack at the workshop." It was a lie. Rosalie knew for sure that Shane hadn't eaten since lunch. She had packed his lunch that morning and seen the empty box in the sink. Why was he lying about such a small thing? The next day, Rosalie decided to surprise Shane at the workshop with lunch. She usually called ahead, but this time she just bought sandwiches at Subway and drove over to see him. The workshop was located in an industrial area, in a small building that Shane had been renting for 15 years. As she pulled up to the building, she saw Wayne's red pickup truck in the parking lot. It was strange. It was a work day, and Wayne should have been at school. She looked at her watch. It was 1:30. Wayne should have been in class right now. Rosalie entered the workshop through the side door. It was quiet inside. She heard voices coming from a small office at the back of the room. Shane had converted it from a storage room a few years ago. The door was ajar. "I can't do this anymore," Shane said quietly. "I understand, but what can we do?" Wayne replied. "Sometimes I think it would be more honest to just..." "Shane, you can't be serious." "Why not?" "Living a lie is killing me." Rosalie froze. What were they talking about? What lie? Her heart began to beat faster. She cautiously moved closer to the office door. "We can be careful," Wayne said. "No one has to know." "But for how long? And is it fair to Rosie?" When her name was mentioned, Rosalie felt the blood drain from her face. They were talking about her. What was she not supposed to know? Shane, think about what will happen if people find out. In this town, your business, my job, Rosie's reputation. I know, but... Rosalie heard the floorboards creak. Someone was approaching the door. She quickly backed away to the entrance and closed the door loudly, pretending she had just entered. Shane? Wayne? I brought lunch. A few seconds of silence, then the sound of chairs being moved and hurried footsteps. Rosie? What are you doing here? Shane came out of the office, his face red, something like panic in his eyes. I decided to surprise you. And Wayne, hi. Shouldn't you be in class right now? Wayne also came out of the office, adjusting his shirt. I have a free period. I stopped by to help Shane with some calculations. How nice, Rosalie said, but something in their behavior made her doubt that explanation. Both men looked agitated, their breathing slightly rapid. You both look agitated. Is everything okay? Of course, Shane replied too quickly. Just discussing a complicated order. Math has never been my strong suit. Wayne nodded. Yes, lots of numbers. Got confused in the calculations. Rosalie looked around the workshop. The workbenches were clean, the tools neatly arranged, no signs of active work. Where are the materials you were calculating? A short pause. Shane and Wayne exchanged glances. In the office, Shane finally said. Catalogs and price lists. Rosalie nodded, but the feeling that something was wrong only grew stronger. She left the sandwiches and drove away, but all day long she couldn't forget the strange atmosphere in the workshop and the fragments of conversation she had overheard. That evening, she decided to ask Shane directly what was going on. Shane, can I talk to you? They were sitting in the kitchen after dinner. Wayne had gone home earlier than usual, saying he needed to prepare materials for tomorrow's lessons. Sure, Shane put down his newspaper, but he looked wary. I'm worried about you. You've been different lately. These late calls, constant work, secret conversations with Wayne. What's going on? Shane was silent for a long time. Nothing special, just a lot of orders, stress. Shane, we've been married for 12 years. I can tell when you're hiding something. I'm not hiding anything. But he didn't look her in the eye. Today at the workshop, you and Wayne were talking about me. I heard my name. Shane tensed. We were discussing your birthday next month. Wayne wanted to know what to get you. It sounded plausible, but Rosalie remembered the tone of their conversation. It wasn't a discussion about gifts. Shane, if you have problems, you can tell me. We're family. I know, honey. And if there were problems, I would definitely tell you. He leaned over and kissed her on the cheek, but the kiss felt cold, perfunctory. When they went up to the bedroom, Shane spent a long time in the bathroom, and when he got into bed, he immediately turned his back to her. Lying in the dark, Rosalie thought about the last few weeks. All these strange things could have an innocent explanation. Maybe Shane really did have financial problems with his business and didn't want to worry her. Maybe Wayne was going through some kind of personal crisis and Shane was helping him as a friend. But then why did she feel like they were hiding something from her? Why did their behavior change just when they started spending more time together? Rosalie decided she would watch more closely. If something was really going on, she would find out sooner or later. November in Texas brought unexpectedly cold weather. By the middle of the month, the temperature had dropped to 0, which was rare for these latitudes. Rosalie was returning home from work earlier than usual. Her last client had canceled their appointment due to sudden illness. It was around 4 in the afternoon, and the gray sky promised rain. As she approached the house, she saw Wayne's red pickup truck in the driveway and was surprised. In 4 days, Wayne was supposed to be coaching the basketball team. She remembered him talking over Sunday lunch about an important game the following week and the need for extra practice. Rosalie parked her Honda in the garage and entered the house through the kitchen. It was quiet inside, but she heard muffled voices coming from the living room. Strange, usually when Wayne came to help with work, they spent their time in Shane's workshop, which was in the basement. Taking off her shoes so as not to make any noise, Rosalie carefully made her way to the living room. The door was ajar, and what she saw made her freeze in her tracks. Shane and Wayne were sitting on the sofa facing each other, their knees touching. Wayne was holding Shane's face in his hands, and they were kissing. It was not a friendly kiss, not a casual touch of the lips. It was a passionate, intimate kiss between two people who had clearly been close for a long time. Rosalie felt the world around her begin to spin. The blood drained from her face, and her heart was beating so hard that she was sure it could be heard throughout the neighborhood. She grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling. Shane ran his hand through Wayne's hair, and Wayne moaned softly. Their hands wandered over each other's bodies with an intimacy that spoke of long months, perhaps years, of hidden relationships. "I miss you every second," Shane whispered. "I'm tired of these games, these lies." "Me too," Wayne replied, pressing his forehead against Shane's. "But what can we do? If people find out, sometimes I think it would be better to just tell Rosie everything and..." "Shane, no. You know what would happen? In this town, we'd lose everything." Rosalie listened as the two people closest to her discussed destroying her life. Her husband, with whom she had lived for 12 years, who swore his love for her every morning, kissed her brother in their family living room. Her brother, who had protected her as a child, who had been a witness at their wedding, was betraying her in the most painful way possible. A wave of rage rose within her with such force that she felt dizzy for a moment. She pushed the door open abruptly. "What the hell is going on here?" Shane and Wayne jumped as if they had been electrocuted. Shane turned pale, and Wayne instinctively tried to stand between him and Rosalie, as if protecting her from attack. "Rosie, I can explain," Shane began in a trembling voice. "Explain!" "Explain?" Rosalie shouted. "What are you going to explain? How long have you been lying to me? How long have you been screwing behind my back?" "Rosalie, please don't yell," Wayne said pleadingly. "The neighbors will hear." "Oh, you're worried about the neighbors." "Wasn't I worried? When did you decide to turn my life into a lie?" Tears of rage streamed down her cheeks. 12 years of marriage, 12 years of trust, 12 years of living with a man who lay next to her every night thinking about her brother. "How long?" she asked in a cold voice. "How long has this been going on?" Shane and Wayne exchanged glances. Their eyes showed guilt, fear, but also something else. Relief that the secret was finally out. 2 years, Shane whispered. "It started 2 years ago." 2 years, Rosalie repeated slowly. "For 2 years, you played the happy family while I was the fool who suspected nothing." "We didn't plan it," Wayne said. "It just happened." "Happened? Happened?" Rosalie laughed hysterically. "What happened? You tripped and fell on my husband's penis?" "Rosalie, please." Shane took a step toward her, but she recoiled. "Don't touch me. Never touch me again." She looked at both of them, at the husband who had given her a name and a home, at the brother who was supposed to protect her. Now they stood together against her, two traitors who had destroyed her world. "You know what the worst part is?" she said quietly. "Not that you're gay. Not that you fuck each other. The worst thing is that you let me live a lie. Every day, every kiss, every I love you was a lie." "That's not true," Shane protested. "I really do love you. Just differently." "Different?" Rosalie felt the rage rising in her again. "You sleep with my brother, but you love me differently?" "You used me as a cover, Shane." 12 years of cover, Wayne finally spoke up. "Rosie, you have to understand. In this town, with these people, we couldn't just..." "Couldn't? Couldn't what? Be honest? Or couldn't find a man of your own instead of stealing mine?" "That's not true," Wayne said. "We didn't plan it. We fought it." "Fought it?" Rosalie looked around the living room, their family nest, where they had just been kissing. "Yes, I can see how hard you fought." She thought of all the evenings Wayne had stayed for dinner, the Sunday lunches, the way they watched football sitting side by side on the sofa. How many times had they touched each other in front of her? How many times had they exchanged glances that she had taken for friendly intimacy? "All this time," she whispered. "All those family dinners, holidays, church services. You sat next to me and laughed at me." "We never laughed," Shane said. "It hurt us." "It hurt you?" "You!" Rosalie felt like she could explode with rage. "What do you think it hurts me? To find out that my life is a farce? That my husband and brother are having sex while I'm at work?" The reality of the situation began to sink in completely. This wasn't just an affair, not just cheating. It was the complete destruction of her life in a conservative town where a scandal of this magnitude meant social death. "My God," she whispered. "What will people say? What will the church say? Margaret Wilson, Betty Parker, all those women who talk about family values? No one must know," Wayne said quickly. "We can what? Continue the lie? Pretend to be a happy family while you secretly meet?" "Rosalie, if this comes out, we will all suffer," Shane said. "My business, Wayne's job at the school, your reputation." "My reputation?" She laughed bitterly. "My reputation? I'll be the woman whose husband turned out to be gay, whose brother seduced her husband. I'll be the subject of pity and gossip for the rest of my life." She imagined the conversations behind her back, the sympathetic looks, the whispers in church. Poor Rosalie. She had no idea. How could she not know? There must have been something wrong with their marriage. "We can get a quiet divorce," Shane suggested. "Say we just grew apart." "And Wayne? What about Wayne? He'll stay in town, teach the kids, and everyone will know the truth." Wayne turned pale. They all understood what exposure meant in Harpersville. Wayne's job at the school would be over in an instant. Shane's business would collapse. Who would want to order furniture from a gay man in a conservative Texas town? Rosalie's reputation would be ruined by the association. "Maybe we should leave," Wayne said quietly. "Start over somewhere else." "Leave?" Rosalie looked at him incredulously. "You want to drop everything and leave with my husband? And I'm supposed to stay here and clean up this mess?" "That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant," she shouted. "You want to take my husband and start a new life with him somewhere where no one knows that he destroyed someone's family?" Rosalie felt something break inside her. Not just her heart, something more fundamental. Her belief in justice, in honesty, in the idea that people close to you couldn't cause such pain. "Get out," she said quietly. "Rosie, get out of my house, both of you." Shane and Wayne slowly made their way to the door. At the door, Shane turned around. "Rosalie, I know you hate us right now, but believe me, we never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," she replied, "and now live with it." When the door closed, Rosalie collapsed onto the sofa, the very sofa where, a few minutes ago, her husband had been kissing her brother. She stared at the cushions, imagining how many times they had been here together while she was at work. The tears stopped. In their place came a cold, calculated rage. Did they think they could just walk away? Start a new life, leaving her to deal with the ruins? Did they think she would let them be happy after what they had done to her? Rosalie sat down at the computer and opened her browser. At first, she searched for information about divorce, property division, what she could get. Then her search took a different direction. How to detect a husband's infidelity. Emotional trauma from betrayal. How to cope with the destruction of a family. But these articles brought no relief. They offered therapy, forgiveness, healing. Rosalie didn't want healing. She wanted justice. Her search became more specific. Revenge on an unfaithful husband. How to make them pay. Untraceable ways to cause harm. She found forums where women shared stories of revenge. Some stories were cruel, others were sophisticated. Rosalie read them all, absorbing the ideas. Then she stumbled upon an article about poisons. The author, claiming to be scientific, described various toxic substances, their effects, and symptoms of poisoning. Arsenic caught her attention in particular. It was relatively easy to obtain. It accumulated in the body gradually, and poisoning could be mistaken for a natural illness. Rosalie closed her browser and sat in the dark, thinking. They had ruined her life, betrayed her trust, and turned her marriage into a farce. Was it fair that they would go unpunished? Was it fair that she would be left alone to deal with the consequences of their selfishness? The next day, after work, Rosalie drove to Home Depot in a neighboring town. She bought rat poison, telling the salesperson that they had a rodent problem in their basement. The arsenic in the product was exactly what she needed. On her way home, she felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in days, she had a plan. For the first time, she was in control of the situation. Shane and Wayne thought they could manipulate her, use her as a cover, and then just walk away. But they were wrong. No one destroys Rosalie Collins' life with impunity. Sunday, November 24th, 2024, was surprisingly warm for late November in Texas. Rosalie woke up early, even though she had slept poorly all week after the opening. Shane had gone fishing with his friend Bob on Saturday evening and didn't return until late at night. They had hardly spoken since the confrontation, exchanging only the necessary phrases about everyday matters. Rosalie stood in the kitchen preparing the traditional Sunday dinner: fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and her famous apple pie. Everything was as usual, just as it had been for 12 years of marriage. But today would be the last such dinner. Shane came downstairs around 10 in the morning, looking tired and tense. The week after the revelation had been difficult for all three of them. Wayne hadn't been home, which was unusual in itself and could raise questions among the neighbors. "Good morning," Shane said cautiously as he poured himself a cup of coffee. "Good morning," Rosalie replied without turning away from the stove. Her voice was even, almost friendly. Over the week, she had learned to control her emotions, to hide her anger behind a mask of normality. "Something smells good," Shane tried to strike up a casual conversation. "I'm making lunch." "Is Wayne coming?" Shane froze with the cup at his lips. "I don't know. We haven't talked." "Call him," Rosalie said. "It's Sunday. Family day." There was something in her voice that made Shane look at her more closely. But Rosalie continued stirring the gravy as if nothing had happened. "Rosalie, we need to talk about—" "Not today," she interrupted. "Today is Sunday, family and church day. We'll talk tomorrow." Shane nodded, clearly relieved to have postponed the inevitable conversation about divorce. He called Wayne, and an hour later, the red pickup truck pulled into the driveway. Wayne entered the house cautiously, as if expecting an explosion, but Rosalie greeted him with the same calm smile. "Hi, Wayne. How's school?" "Fine," he replied, surprised. "We're getting ready for the game next week." "Great. Lunch will be ready in an hour. You can watch the game." Shane and Wayne exchanged glances. Such normality after the previous week seemed suspicious to them, but they didn't know how to react. Perhaps Rosalie had decided it was best to maintain the appearance of normality until they could decide what to do next. They sat down in the living room and turned on the TV, but kept the volume lower than usual. Rosalie could hear their muffled voices from the kitchen, but couldn't make out the words. She wasn't interested. She concentrated on preparing dinner. At 1 o'clock, the table was set. Rosalie laid out the best china, the kind they only used on special occasions. The silver cutlery glinted in the sunlight streaming through the dining room window. Everything looked festive and cozy. "Gentlemen, dinner is ready," she called. Shane and Wayne sat down at the table, still wary, but beginning to relax. Perhaps Rosalie had really decided it was best to end things civilly. Rosalie served the dishes in a specific order. First the chicken, then the side dish, then the gravy. She was an attentive hostess, as always, making sure everyone had enough to eat and drink. "Gravy, Shane?" she offered, lifting the gravy boat. "Yes, thank you," he replied, holding out his plate. Rosalie generously poured dark brown gravy over his potatoes. Wayne declined the gravy. He always preferred to eat his potatoes with butter. The conversation at the table was strained, but gradually the men began to relax. They discussed the Cowboys' game against Washington, Wayne's plans for school vacation, and Shane's new order from First Assembly Bank. Rosalie ate little, mostly listening and contributing to the conversation with short phrases. She watched Shane eat his potatoes with gravy and ask for seconds. A good appetite was important for getting a sufficient dose. "This gravy is especially tasty today," Shane remarked. "Did you add something new?" "A secret ingredient," Rosalie smiled. "A family recipe." After the main course, she served apple pie with ice cream. Shane ate a large piece, Wayne a smaller one. Rosalie watched Shane's every forkful, mentally calculating how much arsenic he had already ingested. Around 3 o'clock, Wayne got ready to leave. "Thanks for dinner, Rosie." "It was delicious, as always." "You're welcome," she replied. "Come again." Shane walked Wayne to the door. Rosalie could hear their muffled voices on the porch, probably discussing her strange calmness. When Shane returned, she was clearing the table. "Let me help you," he offered. "Thanks." They worked in silence, as they had done thousands of times over the years of their marriage. A strange sense of normality descended on the kitchen, as if nothing had changed. Around 4 o'clock, Shane complained of feeling nauseous. "I probably ate too much," he said, sitting down in an armchair in the living room. "Too much pie." "Lie down for a while," Rosalie suggested. "Maybe it will pass." But it didn't pass. By 5 o'clock, Shane was running to the bathroom every 10 minutes. He was nauseous and had started having stomach cramps. "Maybe you ate something bad?" Rosalie suggested, her voice filled with concern. "Or food poisoning?" By 6 o'clock, Shane was lying curled up on the sofa. His face was pale, and he had broken out in a cold sweat. He complained of a burning sensation in his throat and a metallic taste in his mouth. "Shane, you need to see a doctor," Rosalie said. "No, it's just an upset stomach. It'll pass." But by 7 o'clock, his condition had worsened. He began vomiting blood and complaining of chest pains and difficulty breathing. "I'm calling an ambulance," Rosalie announced, reaching for the phone. 911, what is the emergency?" "My husband is very ill. Vomiting, chest pain, breathing problems. Address, 1247 Oak Hill Drive. An ambulance is on its way. Do not leave the patient alone." Rosalie sat down next to Shane on the sofa, holding his hand. His skin was cold and clammy, his pulse rapid and weak. "Everything will be okay," she whispered. "The ambulance is on its way." Shane looked at her with cloudy eyes. "Rosie, Hush, don't talk. Save your strength." The ambulance arrived 8 minutes later. 2 paramedics quickly examined Shane, took his blood pressure and pulse, and hooked him up to an IV. "It looks like severe food poisoning or a heart attack," the senior medic told Rosalie. "We're taking him to Harpersville Hospital." Rosalie followed in her car. At the hospital, Shane was taken to the intensive care unit, and she was asked to wait in the hallway. Dr. Richards, the doctor on duty, came out to see her an hour later. "Mrs. Collins? Your husband is in critical condition. He shows signs of severe poisoning from an unknown substance. We are doing everything we can, but..." "Poisoning?" Rosalie feigned shock. "How is that possible?" "We ate the same food. We are running tests. Perhaps he ate something spoiled or..." The doctor did not finish his sentence, but his expression spoke of bad news. At 11:47 p.m., Shane Collins was pronounced dead. Cause of death: heart failure caused by an unknown toxin. Rosalie sat in the hospital hallway, holding a paper cup of water. Nurses offered their condolences and suggested calling a relative. She asked them to contact Wayne. Wayne arrived at the hospital half an hour later, pale and distraught. "Rosie, what happened?" "I was told that Shane, he died," she said quietly. "The doctors say it was poisoning." Wayne collapsed into a chair next to her. "Poisoning? How? With what?" "I don't know. We ate the same thing, but only he got sick." Wayne took her hand. "I'm so sorry, Rosie. I know you two had problems, but..." "Problems?" She looked at him with a strange smile. "We didn't have problems, Wayne. You had problems." Something in her tone made Wayne wary, but before he could say anything, a man in plain clothes approached them. "Mrs. Collins? I'm Detective Sarah Thompson from the county police. I need to ask you a few questions about your husband's death." Detective Thompson was a woman in her mid-40s with short gray hair and attentive brown eyes. 20 years of police service had taught her to read people, and something about the widow's behavior struck her as odd. "Of course," Rosalie replied. "Anything that will help find out what happened. Tell me about today. What did your husband eat? Where was he? Who did he talk to?" Rosalie gave a detailed account of Sunday lunch, listing all the dishes and mentioning Wayne's presence. "Mr. Harrison, did you eat the same meal?" the detective asked Wayne. "Yes, everything was the same, except for the gravy. I didn't eat that." The detective made a note in her notebook. "Mrs. Collins, had your husband been complaining of any health problems lately?" "No, he was perfectly healthy. He had regular medical checkups. Did he have any enemies? Debts? Business problems?" "No, nothing like that. Shane was a respected member of the community." Detective Thompson asked a few more questions, wrote down their contact information, and said she would contact them after receiving the autopsy results. The next day, Dr. Michael Reeves, the county coroner, performed an autopsy on Shane Collins' body. The results were unexpected. A significant amount of arsenic was found in the deceased's body, enough to cause death. Detective Thompson received the report on Tuesday morning. Suddenly, Shane Collins' accidental death had turned into a murder case. She reread her notes from her conversation with Rosalie Collins. Something about the widow's behavior bothered her. Her emotions were too controlled, her answers too detailed, her explanations too ready. Thompson picked up the phone and dialed a number. "Mrs. Collins? This is Detective Thompson. I need to talk to you again. There are new circumstances. Wednesday, November 27th, 2024. Detective Sarah Thompson sat in her office at the county police headquarters, studying the case file on the murder of Shane Collins. In her 20 years of service, she had investigated many cases, but something about this one bothered her. The autopsy report lay before her. Dr. Michael Reeves had been thorough. Arsenic at a concentration of 14 milligrams per liter of blood, 7 times the lethal dose. The toxin was also found in the stomach and liver, indicating recent consumption. Time of death was between 8 and 12 hours after ingestion. Thompson picked up the phone and dialed Rosalie Collins' number. "Mrs. Collins, this is Detective Thompson. We need to meet. Today, at 2 o'clock, at the police station. Has something happened? Have you found out what happened to Shane?" "Yes, ma'am. We have the autopsy results." At 2 o'clock, Rosalie was sitting in the interrogation room, a small room with gray walls, a metal table, and 3 chairs. Thompson turned on the tape recorder. "Mrs. Collins, the autopsy showed that your husband died of arsenic poisoning. It was not an accident or food poisoning." Rosalie turned pale. "Arsenic? How is that possible? Where could it have come from?" "That's what we're trying to find out. Let's go over Sunday again. Who cooked the meal?" "I did, as usual." "All the dishes?" "Yes, the chicken, potatoes, beans, gravy, pie." Wayne Harrison said he didn't eat the gravy. "Is that true?" "Yes, he never eats gravy. He prefers potatoes with butter." Thompson made a note. "So only you and your husband ate the gravy?" "Yes." "But only your husband got sick. Explain that to me." Rosalie paused. "I ate very little gravy. I wasn't very hungry." "Mrs. Collins, where could you have come into contact with arsenic?" "Nowhere. I work in an insurance office. We don't have any chemicals at home." What about rat poison? Insecticides? Rodenticides? No, we've never had a problem with rats. Thompson watched Rosalie's body language. The woman was nervous, avoiding direct eye contact, her hands trembling. Mrs. Collins, how has your relationship with your husband been lately? Normal. Like any marriage, there have been difficulties, but nothing serious. What kind of difficulties? Rosalie paused for too long. The usual family issues. Finances, plans for the future. Did you know your husband was cheating on you? The question hit her like a shot. Rosalie jumped as if she had been electrocuted. What? No. Shane never. Who told you that? Mrs. Collins, we know about his relationship with your brother, Wayne Harrison. Rosalie's face turned deathly pale. She was silent for a few seconds, then asked quietly, "How did you find out?" "We have witnesses to their intimacy. Wayne Harrison told us the truth under pressure. It was a lie. Thompson was bluffing, but Rosalie's reaction confirmed her suspicions." "So you knew about their relationship?" Rosalie nodded without looking up. "How long?" "A week. I caught them in our house." "And how did you react?" "I was shocked, furious. My husband and my brother," Rosalie's voice broke. "Furious enough to kill?" "No, I didn't kill anyone." Thompson leaned back in her chair. "Mrs. Collins, we have a search warrant for your home. My colleagues are executing it right now." Rosalie turned even paler, if that was possible. Meanwhile, officers Chris Martinez and David Lee were searching the Collins home. In the garage behind some paint cans, Martinez found a box of Decon rat poison containing arsenic. The box had been opened, and more than half of the contents were missing. "Found it," Martinez said into his radio. "Rat poison with arsenic in the garage." Thompson received the message 5 minutes into the second hour of questioning. "Mrs. Collins, my colleagues found rat poison in your garage. Poison with arsenic. The same type of arsenic that killed your husband." Rosalie covered her face with her hands. "I bought it for the rats." "You never had a rat problem. You said so yourself 15 minutes ago." A long pause. Thompson could hear the clock ticking on the wall. "Mrs. Collins, a receipt from Home Depot in the next town shows you purchased this poison on November 17th, a week before your husband's death, the day after you found out about the affair." Rosalie raised her head. Her eyes were red from crying. "Do you want to tell me what really happened?" A long silence. Then Rosalie spoke in a quiet, monotone voice. "I was married to him for 12 years. 12 years. I loved him, supported his business, was a good wife. And he always thought about my brother. Every time he kissed me, he thought about Wayne. Tell me about Sunday. I added poison to the gravy. I knew Wayne wouldn't eat it. I knew Shane would eat a lot. He always asked for seconds." "Did you plan to kill him?" Rosalie looked at the detective with empty eyes. "I planned to make him pay, for ruining my life, for turning our marriage into a lie." "Mrs. Collins, do you understand what you're saying?" "Yes, I killed Shane. I poisoned him with arsenic." Thompson stopped recording. "Rosalie Collins, you are under arrest for the first-degree murder of Shane Collins. You have the right to remain silent." Rosalie Collins' trial began on March 15, 2025. The case received widespread coverage in the local media. "Wife poisons husband over affair with her brother." Headlines splashed across all the newspapers in East Texas. The prosecutor presented compelling evidence: the purchased poison, the confession, the motive. The defense tried to prove temporary insanity, citing emotional trauma from the discovery of the affair. Wayne Harrison testified as a witness. He talked about his relationship with Shane and how they hid it from society. His career at the school was over. The administration fired him immediately after Rosalie's arrest, when the truth came out. "We never wanted to hurt her," Wayne said from the witness stand. "We knew it was wrong, but we couldn't stop." The residents of Harpersville filled the courtroom every day. For a conservative town, it was the scandal of the decade. Pastor Johnson delivered a special sermon on sin and retribution. On May 18, 2025, the jury returned a verdict, guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced Rosalie Collins to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole for 15 years. "Mrs. Collins," said the judge as he handed down the sentence, "you committed a cold-blooded murder out of revenge. Although the circumstances that led to this crime are sympathetic, they do not justify the taking of a human life." Rosalie listened to the sentence without emotion. She had lost weight during her months in prison and aged years. As she was led away in handcuffs, she turned and looked at Wayne, who was sitting in the courtroom. Their eyes met for a moment, then she turned away. Wayne left Harpersville a week after the trial. He sold his house, packed his belongings, and moved to California, where he found a job at a private school. The principal knew about his past, but decided to give him a second chance. The Collins house was sold by the bank for debt. Shane's workshop closed. Customers didn't want to deal with the murdered husband's business. The Collins family disappeared from Harpersville history, leaving only the memory of the scandal. Detective Thompson closed the case and locked the files in the archives. It was one of those cases that reminded her why she became a police officer, to protect the innocent and find justice for the victims. But it was also a case that showed how secrets and lies can destroy lives. Rosalie Collins began serving her sentence in a Texas women's prison. She was placed in a cell with 2 other inmates, one serving time for armed robbery, the other for drug trafficking. They knew her story. News travels fast in prison. "She poisoned her gay husband," one of her cellmates said on the first day. "I respect that. Men should pay for their sins." But Rosalie felt no satisfaction from her revenge. Every night she lay on her narrow bunk and thought about that Sunday lunch, about the last hours of Shane's life. She remembered how he writhed in pain, how he begged for help, how he died in the hospital. Justice had prevailed, but the price was too high. 3 lives had been destroyed in a small Texas town where secrets couldn't stay secret and love between men was considered a sin worse than murder.